Okay, in the last lecture, we have seen or we have started the message passing communication system, right? So, in that, three ways are there to communicate between the processes. First one is the direct and the indirect communication. Second one is synchronous and asynchronous communication. And last one is the automatic and the explicit buffering. Okay, so we in the last lecture we have covered what is the direct and the indirect communication. Now in this lecture we will see what is meant by the synchronous and the asynchronous communication. So whatever the communications are there, these are communications can be done or happens using the send and the receive primitives. So message passing may be either the blocking or the non-blocking, right? So there are two terms are there, blocking and the non-blocking, and these terms are also known as the synchronous and asynchronous communication. So there are the different terms are there. First one is the blocking send, non-blocking send. Again, the blocking receiver and non-blocking receiver, right? So see here first what is meant by the blocking send. So four terms are there related to this synchronous and asynchronous communication. First one is the blocking send. So in this blocking send, the sending is blocked. Sending is stopped until a message is received by a receiving process or a mailbox. So what does it mean? Blocking send. Sending is blocked until a message is received by a receiving process or the mailbox. Means when that mailbox is received, after that sending can be unblocked. But when the up to that point, when the process is receiving, up to that point sending is blocked. Next, when the non-blocking send. In this non-blocking send, the sending process sends the process, and there is no need to block the sender. It can resume its operation. So there is a difference between that blocking send and non-blocking send. Sending is blocked until the message is received by the receiving process. That is the blocking send. And what is the non-blocking? In the non-blocking, sender is not blocked. Sending process sends the message and it can continue its operation. That's why it is called as a non-blocking send. Now next one is the blocking receive and the non-blocking receive. So what is the blocking receive? Means receiver is blocked. In this case, whatever the receiver is there, that receiver is blocked until a message is available. So this situation is occurred when the message is not available. At that time, the receiver will be blocked until your message is available. When the message is available, then receiver can continue its execution, right? Now, what is the non-blocking receive? Non-blocking receive, that is receiver can get the message or retrieve the message, either a valid message or a null. Means here the receiver is not blocked, right? Because it is a non-blocking receive. That's why here the receiver is not blocked because it retrieves either a valid message or a null. That's what is called as a non-blocking receive. So this is all about your synchronous and asynchronous communication. Here, the four terms are there related to the synchronous and asynchronous. First one is the blocking send, non-blocking send, blocking receive, and the non-blocking receive. So our next term or the third way to communicate between the processes by using the message passing model is the automatic and the explicit buffering. So what is meant by the automatic and the explicit buffering? So in this technique or in this way, we are using the buffers. So buffer is nothing but your temporary storage. Buffer is nothing but your temporary storage or the temporary queue where your messages are stored. So in this automatic and the explicit buffering, whether your communication is direct or your communication is indirect, then at that time messages are exchanged. Okay, messages are exchanged by communicating that processes. While your processes are communicating, at that time your messages are exchanged, and that exchanging messages are reside or will be stored in to where that messages are stored where for a temporary, so that messages are stored in the temporary queue. and that is nothing but your buffer. Okay, so whether a communication is direct or indirect, messages are exchanged by communicating processes that will stay in the temporary queue. Basically, such queues or temporary queues can be implemented in the three ways. First one is the zero capacity. Such queues can be implemented in the three ways. First one is the zero capacity. So in this, by this term, you can easily understand that what does it mean? What does it mean? Zero capacity. So what is the capacity of that buffer? Zero. Means it will store nothing, right? It will store nothing, but its capacity is zero. So this queue has a maximum length of the zero. So in this zero capacity way, there is, you can what you can say, in other words, you can say that it will be no buffering here in the zero capacity, because its capacity is zero. So it will not store any messages. Thus, the link cannot have any messages waiting in it, because your capacity because the capacity of that buffer is zero. That's why here the link cannot have any messages waiting in it. Why? Because capacity is zero. Directly when the sender sends the message, it will be directly received by the receiver, right? Because there is no way to store your messages into the buffer, because your buffer has the zero capacity. So here the no buffering is happened. Directly when the sender sends the message, it will be directly received by the receiver. In this case, the sender must block until the recipient receives the message. Up to that point, sender must block, because your sender sends the message. But when that receiver is not receiving that message, up to that point, sender must be blocked. Why? Because that message is not still receiving by the receiver, and up to that point, sender must be blocked. And this is your zero capacity. By that name itself, you can easily understand what does it mean. It means that it has no length, or it has no capacity, zero capacity. Directly when the sender sends the message, it is directly received by the receiver. Now next is what? The bounded capacity. So what is meant by the bounded capacity? So in this capacity, the queue has the finite length n. Hello? Am I audible? Can you see the PPTs? Because I have changed the PPT to the bounded capacity.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so it is visible to all of you, right?
Yes.
Now, what is meant by the bounded capacity? The queue has finite length. The queue has the finite length n. So at most n messages can reside in it. So n messages can reside into it, but because its length or its capacity is n, means at most n messages, जास्तीत जास्त n messages काय होणार त्या buffer मध्ये store होणार. That's why it is called as bounded capacity. Means limit is fixed, finite length n. Up to that n length, it can store the messages. Then if the queue is not full when a new message is sent, then the message is placed in the queue and the sender can continue its execution without waiting. Now see here, what does it mean? If the queue is not full, see here first, second part, that is the sender can continue execution without waiting. Means first, what does the sender, what will we do the sender? The sender sent a message. Okay, sender first to send the message. Then after sending that message, it will check that if the queue is full or not. If the queue is not full, then the message which is sent by the sender can be placed into the queue. If it is already full, then it will not be stored by the queue because it is already full. But when the message sent by the sender, then it will first check that whether that queue is full. If it is not full, then that message which is sent by the sender can be stored into the queue. And after sending the message, sender what will do, or what will continue by the sender, then sender can continue its execution without waiting, right? This is your bounded capacity. And if the link is already full, then sender must block until the space is available in the queue, right? Because your link is already full. Your queue is already full, means there are lot of messages are there. So all that messages are consumed by the, up to the point consumed by the receiver. The sender cannot send the messages, because if the sender send the message, then where will that message will be stored? Because link is already full. So at that time, sender must block. Okay, sender must be blocked until the space is available in the queue, because your link is full. And if the link is not full, then that message can be stored into the queue. But if the link is full, sender must be blocked. This is your second way, that is the bounded capacity. Okay, in the bounded capacity, at most n messages can reside. But in the zero capacity, no buffering is there, because its capacity is the zero. Now see here the last method, that is the unbounded capacity. The queue's length is potentially infinite, because any number of the messages can wait into it or wait in it, because its capacity is unbounded. Its capacity is infinite. Its capacity is infinite because any number of the messages can wait in it, because its queue or its buffer has no length. Its length is infinite. By that word, you can easily understand that it is infinite length. So in this situation, in this infinite lane, the sender never blocks. Why there is a need to block the sender? Because sender can keep on sending the messages, and keep on that messages can be stored into the queue, right? Because your queue length is infinite. Any number of the messages can store into that. Okay, but in real life, it will not be like that. Okay, so because infinite length, in reality it will not be happen like that. It is imaginary, right? Because a queue's length is very infinite. Any number of messages can wait into it. It is not in the real life. It is not a reality. It will be imaginary. So what we have seen up to this point, zero capacity, bounded capacity, and unbounded capacity. So zero capacity, we can sometimes refer to as the no buffering, because there is no buffering there. No buffering is there, because directly sender send the message to, and it is received by the directly a receiver. No storing there or no buffering there in case of the zero capacity. And all the other methods are called as a automatic buffering, right? The remaining two methods we can say that the automatic buffering. So up to this point, we have completed our point, that is the inter-process communication, right? So we will continue our next point, that is scheduling algorithms and the scheduling criteria. So just wait for 1 minute. I will share that. Okay, I have changed my presentation. Can you see this?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay, let's continue. Our next point, that is the scheduling criteria and the scheduling algorithms. What are the different criteria are there? What are the different algorithms are there? We will see in this point. So what is the scheduling criteria? And this scheduling criteria, we can also say that the CPU scheduling criteria. This scheduling criteria is also called as a CPU scheduling criteria. The CPU scheduling, first going into detail of all these criteria are there. First, you have to first understand what is meant by the scheduling, what is meant by the CPU scheduling, right? So what is meant by the CPU scheduling? So CPU scheduling, it is a process that allows one process to use the CPU, while the execution of another process is on hold. Is on hold means what? In the waiting state. Why it is in the waiting state? Because unavailability of any resource like input output. That's why it is, and that process will be in the waiting state, right? So what is the meaning of the CPU scheduling? CPU scheduling means that process, or it is a technique in which one process can use the CPU, because that process will be running. That process will be in the running state. Okay, one process can use the CPU time, because at the same time, but at the same time, another process is on the hold state or in the waiting state. That is nothing but your CPU scheduling, right? One process is executing and another process in the waiting. CPU scheduling, correct? CPU scheduling is a process or the technique which allows one process is using its CPU time while another process is in the waiting state. One process in the running state and another process in the waiting state. That is your CPU scheduling. Now, what is the aim of this CPU scheduling and what is the objective of this CPU scheduling? So what is the aim of this CPU scheduling? Its main aim is to make your system efficient, to make your system very fast, and to make your system as a fair allocation of the CPU. That is your the main task or main aim of the CPU scheduling. And whenever the CPU becomes idle or doing nothing, whenever the CPU beings doing nothing, then operating system must select one of the processes in the ready queue to be executed. So we have already studied about the different states of the process, right? Ready state, running state, and waiting state, terminated state, exit state, right? So whenever the CPU becomes idle or doing nothing, at that time, OS must select one of the processes in the ready queue. So what is meant the ready queue? Ready queue is that queue which places or which stores all the processes which are in the ready state, which are in the ready state. That processes are placed into the ready queue. And when the CPU becomes idle or when the CPU becomes free, at that time OS selects one of the process which are already in the ready queue to be executed. And this selection process, so this selecting process from the ready queue, that selection process is carried out by the short-term scheduler, or we can say that the CPU scheduler, right? So this all the selection process is carried out by whom? By the short-term scheduler, or we can say that the CPU scheduler. Then the scheduler selects from among the processes in the memory that are ready to execute and allocates the CPU to one of them. So this is nothing but the meaning is same, but the sentences are different. Means scheduler selects from among the process which are in the ready state, okay, and allocates the CPU to one of them, because right now the CPU is idle. Right now your CPU is free. Okay, right now your CPU is doing nothing. At that time, OS must select one of the process which are the ready state, and picking up that process which is ready and allocate the CPU to one of them. And this whole process is nothing but your scheduling, right? This whole process you can say that the CPU scheduling process. So this CPU scheduling process, we need to do this all this CPU scheduling process, we need different CPU algorithms. And this different CPU algorithms have the different properties, have the different features, and the choice of the particular algorithm depends on the various factors. To miss which algorithm we can choose in a particular situation, right? Because different scheduling algorithms are there, are in various ways, or in different manners are there, different scheduling algorithms are there. But from that algorithms, which algorithm we can choose or which algorithm we should choose? So how we can decide that? How we can decide that which algorithm we can choose or which algorithm we can select for a particular situation, right? So this is done by your scheduling criteria. Okay. So many criteria have been suggested for comparing your CPU scheduling algorithms. Various criteria are there. You can use this criteria to select your CPU scheduling algorithm. So there are many different criteria are there to check whether considering. Yes.
Ma'am,
Huh?
ma'am, for some students, Zoom is not supporting, so they are all asking to take lecture with Meet or take Mint or Google Meet.
Right now, but
They are all trying, but for some students, Zoom is not supporting.
Why? Because already Khade madam is conducting on the Zoom meeting. At that time,
No, she's taking on TechMint.
on Zoom meeting, no one is there taking the Zoom.
No, ma'am.
Right now, already 45 participants are there.
Some students are messaging to tell you.
Okay. Okay. No problem. I will take today's lecture only on the Zoom because I want to record this lecture, one of the lecture which I have conducted to you. That's why I'm taking this, or I am selecting this this method, Zoom method, because up to this point I have selected a Google Meet. Hello?
Okay, ma'am.
Okay, this lecture I will conduct on the Zoom only because I want to record our lecture. Okay, unmute yourself. Whose mic is on? Whose mic is on? Okay, those are present. Can you see this? Is it supportable to?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, mute yourself. Okay, what are the different scheduling criteria are there? First one is the CPU utilization. Okay. Second one is the throughput. Third one is the turnaround time, waiting time, and the response time. Let's say here first criteria, that is the CPU utilization. So what does it mean actually? CPU utilization. So the main objective of any CPU scheduling algorithm is to keep the CPU as busy as possible. That is your main objective of any scheduling algorithm. Means when we keep the CPU as busy as possible, then and then only we get the maximum output, right? Theoretically, CPU utilization can range from 0 to 100%. Theoretically, we can say that in terms of the words, we can say that it ranges from the 0 to 100%. But in the real-time system, it should range from the 40%. But it should range from the 40% for whom? For the lightly loaded systems, and to the 90% for the heavily used systems. In means you can say that in the percentage, or in the percentage terms, you can say that it is utilized. Up to that much percentage, the your CPU is utilized, right? So in the real-time system, it should range from the 40% for a lightly loaded system and to the 90% for the heavily used system. Now, next point is the throughput. First point is the CPU utilization. Next point is the throughput. If the CPU is busy executing the processes, then work is being done. I have already told you that when your CPU is always busy, then only your work will be done, or you can get the output, or you can get the maximum output when your CPU is busy all the time. If the CPU is busy executing the processes, then work is being done. One measure of the work which is done by the CPU is, and when the CPU is working or executing the processes, your work is being done. Then how we can measure that work? How we can measure? So one measure of the work is the number of the processes which is being executed and completed per unit time. So in words, or in theoretically, we can say that the number of the, how many number of the processes are there which are executed, how many number of the processes are there which are completed per unit time, and that is nothing but your throughput, right? That is nothing but your throughput. Throughput means what? the CPU is busy all the time. CPU is busy executing all the processes, and then only you can say that work is being done. Means your aim must be to maximize the CPU utilization. Means your CPU must be utilized at the maximum level. Then only you can get the maximum output, right? So what is the measure? How we can measure that your work is done by the CPU? So one measure is that how many processes are there which are executed, how many number of processes are there which are completed per unit time. So this much processes are completed, then you can say that this much work is done by the CPU, or you can say that our CPU's throughput is this one. A CPU's throughput is that much, right? So this is called your throughput. This is nothing but your throughput, means number of processes. How many number of processes are executed per unit time? How many number of the processes are there which have completed its task per unit time? And this throughput can vary depending upon the length of that process or the duration of that process. Yes. Okay. Some processes can do this execution or can do this execution in very short period, or some processes can require the very much time. So that your throughput can depend upon the length. That throughput can depend upon your duration of the process. So how we can say that in other words, for the long process, the rate may be one process per hour. Okay, for suppose your process is very long, at that time throughput is the one process per hour. Means in 1 hour only one process will be executed, right? Because your process is very long. So your rate may be one process per hour. And for the short transactions or for the short processes, it may be 10 processes per second. Means in 1 second, 10 processes can be executed if your processes are very short. Okay, so this term or this measure is called as your throughput. What is meant by the throughput? Throughput is nothing but the number of how many processes are there are executed or completed per unit time, and the length of the duration can be vary. Suppose one process is very long, then it will take more time. So that one process can execute it in 1 hour. And for the short processes, it may process or it may proceed in 1 second only. In 1 second only. Okay, means in 1 second, 10 processes can be executed also. So that is nothing but your throughput. Now let's see here the third criteria. What is that? Turnaround time. For a particular process, an important criteria is how long it takes to execute that process. We are up to that point. We are looking that processes are executing, how much time or how long it will take, right? So this is your turnaround time. Is what does it mean? Turnaround time. How long it takes to execute that process? How much time it will require to complete its execution? How long it takes to execute that process? And that time is nothing but your turnaround time. Okay, in the theoretically or formally, you can define that the interval from the time the submission of a process, okay, the time of submission of a process to the time of completion is known as the turnaround time. What we can say that the difference or the interval from the time of submission of a process means the process when your process is submitted from that time and when your process is completed up to that time. Okay, what is the difference between the turnaround time is nothing but the difference between your process submission and the process completion, right? The difference, it is the difference between the process submission and the process completion. Or you can say that in terms of the sum of the times. How we can define that? The turnaround time is the sum of the times spent, some of the time spent waiting to get into the memory, waiting into the ready queue, waiting or executing in the CPU, and waiting for the input and output. So this is your sum of the times, and this is your turnaround time. Turnaround time is the sum of times which is spent waiting to get into the memory. Means firstly that process will be in the secondary memory, right? And to execute that process, you have to take that process from the secondary memory and put that into the main memory. So that time also considered in the turnaround time. So times spent waiting to get into the memory, waiting into the ready queue. Now again, when the process are want to execute, then that process must be come or must be go into the ready queue, right? After that, executing into the CPU. Whatever the time required to complete execution in the CPU, that is also executing in the CPU. That time also considered in the turnaround time. Again, waiting for the input and output. That time also considered in this turnaround time. So all this sum of the times are called is the turnaround time. Okay. Waiting time. A scheduling algorithm does not affect. So what is a waiting time? Waiting time. From that name itself, you can easily understand what does it mean. Waiting time. A scheduling algorithm does not affect the time which is required to complete the process once it starts the execution. It does not affect the time required to complete the process, but it will affect the time for the waiting. It only affects the waiting time of a process, that is time spent by a process waiting in the ready queue. So what is the time is required there to wait in the ready queue? That time is nothing but your waiting time, right? Because your algorithm does not affect the time required to complete the process, but it will affect the waiting time of a process, because how much time it's required to wait in the ready queue. That is very important because it affects your algorithm, means it affects your whole process or execution. Waiting time, or in other words, you can say that waiting time, it is the sum of the periods which are spent waiting in the ready queue. So whatever the why there is a waiting, or why there is a waiting in the ready queue, because all the processes which are ready, that all process must be put into the ready queue first, right? And from that processes, ready queue processes, that from that ready queues, processes can pick and put into the running state, or put the or allocate the CPU time to execute. Okay, so what is the waiting time there in the ready queue? That is nothing but the waiting time. Now next point or next criteria is the response time. Response time, amount of the time, the response time is the amount of the time it takes from when a request was submitted and until the first response is produced. ज्यावेळी तुमची रिक्वेस्ट एखादी सबमिट झाली आणि ते सबमिट झाल्यानंतर जेवढ्या वेळेमध्ये तुम्हाला रिस्पॉन्स मिळतो, फर्स्ट रिस्पॉन्स मिळतो, तो टाइम म्हणजे तुमचा रिस्पॉन्स टाइम. ओके, द अमाऊंट ऑफ द टाइम इट टेक्स फ्रॉम द वेन द रिक्वेस्ट वॉज सबमिटेड, ज्यावेळी रिक्वेस्ट तुमची सबमिट झाली आणि ज्यावेळी फर्स्ट रिस्पॉन्स प्रोड्यूस झाला, तो इंटरव्हल म्हणजेच तुमचा रिस्पॉन्स टाइम. Remember, it is the time till first response. Okay, it is the time till the first response. म्हणजे जेव्हा फर्स्ट रिस्पॉन्स प्रोड्यूस होतो, तो म्हणजे तुमचा रिस्पॉन्स टाइम, नॉट द completion of process execution. म्हणजे final response time नाही, not the completion of process execution or the final response. It is the time till the first response will generate. Response time is the time taken to start responding to the request. Yeah, and the scheduler must aim to minimize the response time for the interactive users. A scheduler must aim to minimize the response time for the interactive user. So what does it mean? Scheduler, the aim is to minimize the response time. Why there is a need to minimize your response time? What is the meaning of the response time? Response time is when the request was submitted and when the response is produced. Between that interval, that time is the response time. म्हणजे रिक्वेस्ट तुमची सबमिट झाल्यानंतर ज्यावेळेला फर्स्ट रिस्पॉन्स प्रोड्यूस होतो, तो इंटरव्हल म्हणजे तुमचा रिस्पॉन्स टाइम. पण मेन एम काय आहे? मिनिमाइज रिस्पॉन्स टाइम. म्हणजेच मिनिंग काय त्याचं? मिनिमाइज रिस्पॉन्स टाइम म्हणजे ज्यावेळी रिक्वेस्ट सबमिट होते त्यावेळेला क्विकली तुम्हाला रिस्पॉन्स मिळाला पाहिजे. म्हणजे ज्यावेळी रिस्पॉन्स टाइम तुमचा कमी असेल, त्याच वेळेला रिस्पॉन्स क्विक होणार. ज्यावेळी रिस्पॉन्स टाइम तुमचा लेंदी असेल किंवा लॉंग असेल, तर रिस्पॉन्स वेळाने मिळणार. ओके, आउटपुट तुम्हाला वेळाने मिळणार, राईट? दॅट्स वाय the main aim of the scheduler is, or scheduling is, to minimize the response time, to get the response very quickly for the interactive users. Then and then only it will be very convenient for all the users to use the system, and it will be very recommended to get or to minimize your response time. So in other words, we can say that it is very desirable or it is very recommended to maximize the CPU utilization and throughput. Okay, maximize which terms? CPU utilization, throughput, and minimize which terms or criteria? To minimize turnaround time, to minimize the waiting time, and to minimize the response time also. Okay, so up to this point, we have studied the different criteria: CPU utilization, throughput, turnaround time, waiting time, and the response time. So among these criteria, we have to minimize or we have to maximize CPU utilization, we have to maximize the throughput, but we have to minimize turnaround time, we have to minimize the waiting time, we have to minimize the response time also, right? So up to this point, we have covered the different scheduling criteria are there. Okay, am I audible to all of you? Can you see my presentation? Hello, am I audible to all of you? Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now to this point, we have covered the scheduling criteria are there. Now let's see here the scheduling algorithms. Okay, there are various algorithms are there which are used by the operating system to schedule your processes on the processor or to the CPU in a very efficient way. So in this scheduling algorithm, various algorithms are there to use by the operating system and to schedule. So what is the aim of the scheduling algorithms? To schedule the processes on the processor very efficient way. Now, what are the different scheduling algorithms are there? First one is the first come first server scheduling, that is FCFS. Second, shortest job first scheduling, that is SJF. Third one is the priority scheduling. Okay, so these three algorithms are there which are used to schedule the process on the processor. So first one is the FCFS. It is nothing but your first come first serve scheduling. Now let's say what is by the, or before going into detail of all these algorithms, we have to understand what are the different terminologies are there which are used while CPU scheduling or while using the CPU scheduling algorithms. What are those terminologies? Arrival time. Arrival time is nothing but the time at which the process arrives in the ready queue. So it is very easy to understand. Arrival time is when your process arrives in the ready queue, that time is nothing but your arrival time. Completion time. The completion time is the time required to complete its execution for the process. The time at which process completes its execution, it's nothing but your completion time. Burst time. The time required by a process for the CPU execution. Okay, the time required by a process for the CPU execution is nothing but your burst time. And completion time is what? The process completes its execution, its completion time, but time required by a process to execute the CPU time or for the CPU execution is nothing but your burst time. Now, why there is a need to use this scheduling algorithms, or what are the different objectives are there, or what is the purpose of the scheduling algorithm? Why there is a need to use the scheduling algorithm? Why there is a purpose to use this different scheduling algorithm? First one is the maximize the CPU utilization or maximum CPU utilization, means keep your CPU as busy as possible. That is your first purpose. Then fair allocation of the CPU. What does it mean, fair allocation of the CPU? Each and every process wants the CPU. Each and every process wants the CPU time to complete its execution, right? So fair allocation of the CPU means CPU must be allocated fairly among different processes. That is your fair allocation of CPU. Maximum throughput. So as we have already studied, what is the throughput? Number of processes that complete their execution per time unit. That is your throughput, but that throughput must be maximized. Then minimum turnaround time. What is that turnaround time? That is the time taken by a process to finish the execution. Is nothing but your turnaround time. So to complete your process, your time must be minimized. Okay, that's why our one of the purpose is the minimize turnaround time. Minimum waiting time also, because this time is called as a waiting in the ready queue. The time a process needs or time process wants to wait in the ready queue. That is nothing but your waiting time. Our main must be or should be minimize your waiting time or minimize the waiting time for a process. Minimize the response time also. Okay, time when a process produces the first response. When your response time must be minimum, then and then only you can get the output or a response very quick or very fast. If it will be a very maximum, then you can get the output very long time. Means the completion will be very long or it will be time consuming. That's why our aim must be or should be the response time must be minimum. Then and then only you can get the output very fast. Now, there are two terms are there related to the scheduling algorithm. Whether that algorithm should be the preemptive scheduling or it should be the non-preemptive scheduling also. So what is the preemptive and non-preemptive? Okay, so these terms are related to the scheduling algorithm. But that's why you have to understand first what does it mean? What is the preemptive scheduling and what is meant by the non-preemptive scheduling? In the preemptive scheduling, the tasks are mostly assigned with their priorities. So in this preemptive scheduling, priorities are very important. Means lower priority processes, higher priority processes, right? So tasks are there that are mostly assigned with their priorities. Which process can have the higher priority? Which process are having the lower priorities? So all these terms are considered in this primitive scheduling. So sometimes it is very important to run a task with the higher priority process before another the lower priority task. Even if the lower priority task is still running. Suppose one process is running. Okay, some process is already running in the system. Then that process is already in the ready state. And while that process is running, some higher priority process comes there into the ready queue. Okay, higher priority process comes there. At that time, that running state or running process, that is a lower priority process, can be stopped or should be stopped. Why? Because your higher priority process comes there into the ready queue. Then your lower priority process must be paused there, and higher priority process comes into the CPU scheduling or allocated the CPU time, and that higher priority process can running its execution. And when it's complete its execution, higher priority process, and then after that completing the higher priority process completion, then lower priority process can resume its operation. That means this scheduling is based on the priorities. The lower priority task holds for some time. Why? Because higher priority process is running now. It is hold or it is paused. Lower priority process is paused because higher priority process are running now. And after completing its execution, resumes the lower priority task or lower priority process, and resumes when the higher priority task finishes its execution. Okay, what is meant the preemptive scheduling? प्रिमिटिव्ह शेड्युलिंग मध्ये प्रायोरिटीज आहेत त्याला जास्त वेटेज आहे. प्रायोरिटीज हायर प्रायोरिटी प्रोसेस आणि लोअर प्रायोरिटी प्रोसेस. सपोज एखादी प्रोसेस करंटली रनिंग स्टेट मध्ये आहे, म्हणजे करंटली रनिंग आहे किंवा करंटली एक्झिक्युटिंग आहे, पण त्या प्रोसेसची प्रायोरिटी लोअर आहे. ज्यावेळेस ती प्रोसेस रनिंग मध्ये आहे त्याच वेळेला एक हायर प्रायोरिटी प्रोसेस रेडी क्यू मध्ये अराईव्ह होते. हायर प्रायोरिटी प्रोसेस. ओके. ज्यावेळेला हायर प्रायोरिटी प्रोसेस एखादी रेडी स्टेट मध्ये अराईव्ह होते, त्यावेळेला जे करंटली रनिंग प्रोसेस आहे, सपोज ती जर लोअर प्रायोरिटी प्रोसेस असेल, जी करंटली रनिंग प्रोसेस, तर ती प्रोसेस पॉज केली जाते, सस्पेंड केली जाते. कारण हायर प्रायोरिटी प्रोसेसला जास्त वेटेज आहे, कारण त्याची प्रायोरिटी हायर आहे. त्यामुळे ती प्रोसेस पहिल्यांदा एक्झिक्युशनसाठी घेतली जाते सीपीयू कडून. मग ती प्रोसेस ज्यावेळेला रनिंग मध्ये असते, त्यावेळेला लोअर प्रायोरिटी प्रोसेस होल्ड असते किंवा पॉज मध्ये असते, सस्पेंड केली जाते. आणि ज्यावेळेला हायर प्रायोरिटी प्रोसेस त्याचे एक्झिक्युशन कंप्लीट करते, त्यानंतरच लोअर प्रायोरिटी प्रोसेस त्याची एक्झिक्युशन रिझ्यूम करू शकते किंवा तिथून कंटिन्यू करू शकते. राईट. दिस इज कॉल्ड the primitive scheduling. And in contrast to this, there is a non-primitive scheduling. Okay, what does it mean? Non-primitive, it is totally contrast to the primitive scheduling. So in this type of the scheduling algorithm or method, once the CPU has been allocated to a specific process, and that process keeps the CPU until it releases the CPU either by terminating or by requesting the IO. So it is totally opposite to the primitive because it is non-primitive. Once the CPU has been allocated to a specific process, that process keeps that CPU. It will not release the CPU whether the higher priority process will come or not. It is not matter. It does not matter there because here priority is not taken into the consideration, right? Keeps the CPU until it releases the CPU either by terminating or by requesting the IO. कळालं? हे टोटली ऑपोजिट आहे प्रिमिटिव्ह शेड्युलिंगच्या. ज्या वेळेला एखादी प्रोसेसला सीपीयू टाइम अलोकेट होतो, म्हणजे सीपीयू हॅज बीन अलोकेटेड टू द स्पेसिफिक प्रोसेस, म्हणजे ज्यावेळी एका पर्टिक्युलर प्रोसेसला सीपीयू टाइम अलोकेट होतो, त्यावेळेला ती प्रोसेस सीपीयू कीप करते. म्हणजे काय करते? प्रोसेस ती सीपीयूचा टाइम युटिलाइज करते. ती त्या सीपीयूचा प्रोसेस रिलीज नाही करत जोपर्यंत ती प्रोसेस टर्मिनेट होत नाही किंवा होल्ड स्टेटमध्ये किंवा वेटिंग स्टेटमध्ये जात नाही तोपर्यंत. मग ह्यामध्ये मॅटर करत नाही की वेदर देर इज अ हायर प्रायोरिटी प्रोसेस कम्स और नॉट. इट डज नॉट मॅटर देअर. That's why it is called as a non-preemptive scheduling. But in the preemptive scheduling, priority matters. When the higher priority comes, lower priority suspend and continue execution after finishing your higher priority process, right? But in case of the non-preemptive, it is not like that. Now, after discussing all these terms, first see here your first scheduling algorithm. So up to this point we have covered, or up to this point we have studied what are the different terms are there which are related to the scheduling algorithm. So what are the different criteria are there, right? So what are the different criteria are there? These criteria are very important to select your algorithm, to select your correct algorithm. So this is your first algorithm, that is nothing but the first come first serve algorithm, that is FCFS. This algorithm is very simplest algorithm because it schedules according to the arrival time of the process. So here, see here, it is, or I am repeating here, the simplest, it is very simplest algorithm, and that schedules according to the arrival time of the process. So it is very important here because this algorithm works on arrival times of the process. At what time that process has arrived, that time is very important. That time matters here in this algorithm. How? See here. The first come first serve scheduling algorithm states that the process that requests the CPU first is allocated the CPU first. The process which requests the CPU first is allocated the CPU first. That's why it is called as a first come and first served. When the process requesting the CPU, suppose it is first process, then it will be allocated the CPU first because that is the first process which is requesting the CPU. And it is implemented by using the FIFO queue, that is first in and the first out queue. So this is FCFS is implemented by using the queue, and that is called as a FIFO queue, that is first in and the first out queue. When a process enters, its PCB is linked onto the tail of the queue. When a process enters the ready queue, its PCB is nothing but a process control block. that process control block is linked onto the tail of the queue, right? Its PCB is linked, not the processor, but its process control block is linked onto the tail of the queue. And when the CPU is free, and when the CPU is free, or when the CPU becomes idle, then at that time it is allocated to the CPU at the head of the queue. And then running process is then removed from the queue. Your running process is then removed from the queue. So how the FCFS is work, or how there is a working of the FCFS. FCFS म्हणजेच काय, फर्स्ट कम फर्स्ट सर्व. जो प्रोसेस फर्स्ट येतो तोच फर्स्ट सर्व केला जाणार. दॅट्स व्हॉट इज कॉल्ड एज अ फर्स्ट कम फर्स्ट सर्व. आणि हा जो FCFS शेड्युलिंग अल्गोरिदम आहे तो इम्प्लिमेंट कशामुळे होतो, फिफो क्यू मध्ये, फर्स्ट इन फर्स्ट आउट मध्ये. ज्यावेळेला प्रोसेस रेडी क्यू मध्ये एंटर होतो, म्हणजे रेडी क्यू मध्ये काय प्रोसेस असतात किंवा काय स्टेटचे प्रोसेस असतात, जे प्रोसेस रेडी स्टेट मध्ये असतात ते सगळे प्रोसेस रेडी क्यू मध्ये असणार. ओके. ज्यावेळेला प्रोसेस एखादा एंटर करतो रेडी स्टेट मध्ये, त्यावेळेला त्याची जी पीसीबी असते, प्रोसेस कंट्रोल ब्लॉक, ती लिंक होते टेल ऑफ द क्यू. द क्यूचं टेल आहे त्याला ती लिंक होणार पीसीबी. आफ्टर दॅट आता सीपीयू त्याचं प्रोसेस काय करतो, कम्प्लीट करतो. म्हणजे करंटली सपोज एखादा सीपीयू एखादी प्रोसेस कम्प्लीट करतोय किंवा रनिंग स्टेट मध्ये, ज्या आता सपोज त्या प्रोसेसचं एक्झिक्युशन कम्प्लीट झालं. ओके, त्या प्रोसेसचं एक्झिक्युशन कम्प्लीट झालं. नाव आता ह्या वेळेला सीपीयू इज फ्री, म्हणजे सीपीयू इज आयडल. ह्या वेळेला सीपीयू फ्री आहे. ह्या वेळेला काय होणार सिच्युएशन, इट इज अलोकेटेड द प्रोसेस ऍट द हेड ऑफ द क्यू. ती प्रोसेस ऑलरेडी स्टोअर कुठे आहे, रेडी क्यू मध्ये आहे. देन इट इज अलोकेटेड टू द प्रोसेस ऍट द हेड ऑफ द क्यू. आता रेडी क्यू मध्ये जी फर्स्ट प्रोसेस रेडी आहे ती प्रोसेस पिक केली जाणार. ओके, ती प्रोसेस पिक केली जाणार आणि ती अलोकेटेड होणार कुठे, ऍट द हेड ऑफ द क्यू. कारण का, right now your CPU is free, right now your CPU is idle, right now your CPU is doing nothing. आता जी प्रोसेस जी रेडी क्यू मध्ये आहे त्यातली एक प्रोसेस पिक केली जाणार आणि त्याला सीपीयू टाइम अलोकेट होणार. आता ती प्रोसेस रेडी स्टेट मधून कोणत्या स्टेट मध्ये गेली, आता ती प्रोसेस रेडी स्टेट मधून रनिंग स्टेट मध्ये गेली, कारण त्या प्रोसेसला तुमचा सीपीयू टाइम अलोकेट झालेला आहे. एकदा का सीपीयू टाइम त्या प्रोसेसला अलोकेट झाला की ती प्रोसेस रनिंग होते. ती प्रोसेस राईट नाव एक्झिक्युटिंग. And when it is executing, now there is no need to place that process in the queue, right? Because now your process is running. Now that running process is then removed from the queue, from the ready queue, because your state of that process is now from ready to the running. And this is all about your FCFS, first come first served. So what are the different features of the FCFS? What are the different characteristics are there? Am I audible to all of you? Is it visible? Am I audible? Is my PPT is visible to all of you? Reply me fast. Am I audible? Am I audible or not? Can you see these PPTs? Can you see the presentation? Am I audible? Shivani, Atharva, Pratiksha, Anjali.
Yes.
Okay. Now, what are the different features of the FCFS method? It offers the non-preemptive scheduling algorithm. So just now we have studied, or we have covered what is the preemptive scheduling and the non-preemptive scheduling. And this FCFS is nothing but the non-preemptive scheduling algorithm. So in this, jobs are always executed on a first come and first served basis. And it is very easy to implement and it is very easy to use. but this method is poor in the performance. This method is very poor in the performance, and general waiting time is very high. So how it is the waiting time is high? When the waiting time is high, then that algorithm will not be recommended. Okay, because our aim is, our purpose of the scheduling is to minimize your waiting time, to minimize the waiting time of the process. But in the FCFS, the waiting time is quite high, so it is not recommended, or this method is not used very much. So what is the general term to decide which algorithm is better and which algorithm is not? So to decide which algorithm is better and which algorithm is suitable, then you can calculate, or we have to calculate the average waiting time. Okay, average waiting time. And for the every scheduling algorithm, average waiting time, it is a very important parameter or important factor to judge its performance. Means to judge whether that algorithm is suitable, whether this algorithm is useful or not. So to judge this, you have to use, or you can use the average waiting time as a parameter. AWT, or the average waiting time, is nothing but the average of the waiting times of the processes in the queue. जे क्यू मध्ये जो वेटिंग टाइम तुम्हाला रिक्वायर आहे किंवा नीड आहे, तो वेटिंग टाइम म्हणजेच काय, त्या प्रोसेसचा, त्या पर्टिक्युलर प्रोसेसचा वेटिंग टाइम. अगेन, वेटिंग टाइम फॉर द शेड्युलर टू पिक देम फॉर द एक्झिक्युशन. आता ज्यावेळी एखादी प्रोसेस रेडी स्टेट मध्ये असते, त्या रेडी स्टेट मधून त्या प्रोसेसला रनिंग स्टेट मध्ये आणण्यासाठी जो टाइम असतो, तो सुद्धा काय असतो, वेटिंग टाइम. शेड्युलर साठी waiting time for the scheduler to pick them from the ready queue and put them or allocate them the CPU time, right? So this is your average waiting time, and it is nothing but the waiting times of the processes in the ready queue, waiting time for the scheduler, waiting time for the scheduler to pick them for the execution. Lower the average waiting time, better the scheduling algorithm. So how we can judge that? So our aim must be the minimum waiting time or minimum average time is there. Suppose that algorithm has the lower average time, then that algorithm must or should be better, or that algorithm will be better because its average time is lower, or its average time is very low. So you can understand these terms by using one example. Okay, by using one example. In this example, we are taken the three processes are there, P1, P2, and P3. And according to that processes, burst time is there. Okay, we are taking the, or in that example itself, burst time is given. So what is about the burst time? Burst time is nothing but to complete the execution of that particular process. Means process P1 requires a 24 burst time is 24 milliseconds. Okay, consider the following set of the processes that arrive at time 0 and with the length of the CPU burst given in the milliseconds. So what is the burst time is there? We can measure it into the milliseconds. So process P1 need the 24 milliseconds, okay, to complete its execution. P2 process requires the 3 milliseconds to complete its execution. Again, P3 process need the 3 milliseconds burst time to complete its execution, right? So this is your example. And in this example, we are taking the three process and burst time also. So this is the bar chart or the Gantt chart. If the processes arrive in the order P1, P2, P3 and are served in the FCFS order, okay, so in this order is very important. See here, your order is the P1, P2 and P3. So according to that order, we are using the FCFS. Okay, in the FCFS order is very important here. See here, order is very important. We are looking at, or we are taking the order P1, P2 and P3. So by taking this order, your result is shown in the Gantt chart, or we can also say that the bar chart. So that bar chart illustrates a particular schedule, including the start time and the finish time of each of the participating processes. So what is the start time and what is the finish time of each and every process? Okay, so look at this bar chart. P1 is there, P2 and P3 is there. So what is that 0? Okay, 0 is the start time of the process P1. Why the process time or what is the start time of the P1 is 0? Because your order is P1, P2, P3 and your first process is P1. That's why there is no need to wait for the P1, right? So that's why is P1's waiting time is 0. Now, how much milliseconds required for the P1 to complete the execution? That is 24. Now see here, the 24. Okay, so P1 requires the 24 milliseconds to complete its execution. So here waiting time is 0 and start time is the 0 and finishing time or finish time is 0 to 24. That is for the process P1, 24 milliseconds it's its finish time. Again, P2. For the P2, P2 will start its execution at the 24 milliseconds. And how much time it will require or how much time it needs? It needs only 3 milliseconds. That's why 24 plus 3, that is 27. So 27 milliseconds is required time for the P2 to complete its execution, right? So P2 will start at the 24 and it will finish at the 27, right? Again, consider here P3 process. P3 process will start its execution at the 24 and its finish and its required time is burst time is what? Its burst time, P3's burst time is what? P3's burst time is the 3. That's why 27 plus 3, that is 30. So P3's finish time is the 30. Okay. So what is the, this is the start time and this is the finish time. Okay. Start time, finish time. For the P1, start time is 0, finish time is 24. For the P2, start time 24, finish time 27. For the P3, start time 27, finish time is the 30. Now, how we can calculate the waiting time? Okay, waiting time. Your first process in the order is P1. That's why there is no need to wait for the process P1. That's why process P1 will take the 0 milliseconds as the waiting time. That's why waiting time for the process P1 will be the 0 milliseconds. After that, that process P1 requires the burst time 24 milliseconds. So 0 to 24, it will complete its execution, right? So that completion time of the process P1 will be वेटिंग टाइम फॉर द P2, राईट? म्हणजे जी प्रोसेस P1 आहे ते 24 मिलीसेकंड त्याला रिक्वायर आहे. जोपर्यंत ती प्रोसेस P1 त्याचं एक्झिक्युशन कंप्लीट करत नाही तोपर्यंत P2 साठी ओके P2 इज इन द वेटिंग स्टेट, राईट? P2 ला वेट करावं लागेल जोपर्यंत P1 त्याचं एक्झिक्युशन कंप्लीट करत नाही. त्यामुळे P1 चे जे कंप्लीशन टाइम आहे ते P2 साठी वेटिंग टाइम होणार. That's why we can say that 24 is the waiting time for the P2. Same for the P3. आता P2 ला बस टाइम किती रिक्वायर आहे 3. ओके 3. That's why 24 plus 3, that is 27. So completion time जो P2 चा जो completion time आहे तो P3 साठी काय होणार waiting time. So that's why it is the 27 is the completion time for the P2, but 27 is the waiting time for the P3. That's why we can say that waiting time is the 0 for P1, 24 is for the P2, and 27 for process P3. Thus, you can calculate easily what is the average waiting time. 0 plus 24 plus 27 slash 3, that is 17 milliseconds. So here your average waiting time is 27 milliseconds when you take the order, that is P1, P2 and P3. When you take the order as P1, P2, P3, then your average waiting time is the 17 milliseconds. But suppose you change the order. Okay, so now suppose you want to change the order. Now, if the processes arrive in the order, that is P2, P3 and P1. In the first case, we are taking the order P1, P2, P3. But now we are changing the order and we are taking the processes in the order, that is P2, P3 and P1. Now see here, what are the different results are there. P2, your first process is the P2. That's why there is no need to wait for the process P2. That's why its waiting time is 0, obviously. Now, what is the burst time for the P2? Burst time for the P2 is 3. That's why it will take the 3 milliseconds. Now, it is the finishing time for completion time for the P2. But this is the waiting time for the P3. Okay. Now, again, P3 requires the 3 milliseconds as the burst time. Now, 3 plus 3, that is 6. So, this is your completion time of the P3. But this 6 is the waiting time for the P1 because it's completion time of the P3, right? Now, what is the burst time for the P1? That is 24. Now, this is the 6 plus 24, that is 30. Now, it is the start time for the P1 or waiting time for the P1 will be 6, right? Because this is the 6 is the completion time for the P3, but it will be the waiting time for the P1. Okay, so we can say that the waiting time for the P1 is 6. Waiting time for the process P2 is the 6, and 0 is the waiting time is the 6 for the process P1. 0 is for the P2 because P2 is the first process in the order, and 3 milliseconds for the process P3. Now calculate the average waiting time. Now the average waiting time is 3. Can you see here the difference? When you are taking the order that is P1, P2, P3, your average waiting time is 17. But when you choose the order that is P2, P3, P1, your average waiting time is what? 3 milliseconds. So it is recommended. Can you see here? Because every time when the sequence of the process changes, the average waiting time will also change, right? So it means that your FCFS algorithm is not an optimal scheduling algorithm. Okay, it is not an optimal scheduling algorithm because it is a type of the non-preemptive scheduling, and it requires a very high waiting time, and it requires a very quite long waiting time. Okay, so up to this point, we have covered our first scheduling algorithm, that is your FCFS, that is first in, first come, first served. Okay. Now we should stop here, and we will continue the next algorithm in our next lecture. Thank you. Am I audible to all of you? All of you there? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Pratiksha, Anjali, Shivani, Atharva, Anjali, Akanksha, Aditi, Yogita, Sakshi, Vishwajit.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay, tell me your name and the roll numbers in the chat box. After that, only you can leave the meeting. Okay. Tell me your name along with the roll number in the chat box. Fast.